صباح الخير وأهلا وسهلا فيكم. شكرا جزيلا على حضوركم.
Good morning and thank you for being here. I'm Dima Hamdan. I'm the director of America, which is an Arab network for comprehensive services for skills enhancement for journalists. Well, the question or the title of our session is whether the freelance journalism is an affordable job. Well, we're talking about wages and salaries because, as you know, this is an international issue. We, as a network, we noticed that, of course, so we have more than 300 members, journalists as members, and every now and then we hear about payment issues. We know that some salaries are slow or rather delayed, and with time we found out that it's really a much wider topic, and some journalists do have to have another job, a second job, or even to shift to have a different job for financial reasons. And this is why we thought that this must be discussed, of course, today with our speakers, with our guests. And of course, this is not limited to female journalists. It, of course, concerns all journalists. However, in order to monitor the size of the problem, we as female journalists, we decided to conduct every 2 weeks a survey, and let me share the main results or outcomes of our very basic survey. Well, that was, of course, an elective question. The question was, well, in the last 3 years, did you or were you subjected to any oppression, any unfairness in terms of your salary? For instance, if your salary was low or delayed, or you didn't, have never been paid, or was there any difference between your salary and the other male colleagues' salaries? And actually, almost 60% of the interviewed said that that was true, and 40% preferred not to answer. Before overviewing a few reasons, let me say that in all platforms, whether local platforms, in Arab platforms, in media platforms, in international major newspapers and media institutions platforms, most forms of violations are related to low salaries in general. Well, for instance, an article of 1,500 words is usually paid. The payment is around $500, and some colleagues had to write 7 or even 8 or 9 articles and had to wait even up to 1 year to be paid. I mean, a low salary, and sometimes they were not paid at all, and sometimes money transfers have been delayed. And some members, when they did their computation or calculation, found out that they indeed paid for their articles, the articles they wrote, especially when journalists were based in a country and transfers were made from another country, in addition to the commission fees that were deducted of 10 or 15 or even $60 out of $100. Can you imagine? So there is a huge difference in the wages of female and male journalists. This is what we call the wage gap, unfortunately. And of course, this is totally expected, unfortunately, in our region. And we, as a network, we also noticed that quite often female journalists are being subjected to, or they are being marginalized, or they feel embarrassed. This is why they do not claim any promotion, any increase in their salary. And we also noticed that there was a decrease in salaries during the pandemics, and that was, of course, understandable. But I mean, the salaries, even though after the pandemics, are still the same. In addition to the devaluation of currencies in different countries, as we witnessed in different countries, hence the decrease of salaries. In addition to many journalists working without any agreement, official contract, even after 6 or 7 years of regular work with a media platform. And so they are being treated and relied upon as, I mean, regular employees, however, without any, pension, without any insurance, anything. And I must not forget that in many cases, journalists are not being paid at all. Some journalists are so enthusiastic just for the sake of receiving or having the opportunity of working for some specific media institutions. So they decide to start working, in a very loyal way. And later on, they, notice that the editor-in-chief, their boss, never proposed any payment. And this is why they end up without any payment. So this is what I wanted to share with you. I mean, so those main outcomes. And of course, on the screen, you can read our website and our email address, the Marie Colvin Journalists Network. And let me welcome our guest or speaker. First, Ansar Toimzy, who is a freelance Palestinian investigative journalist, and she has, of course, a rich personal experience. We thank her for her presence, and we look forward to hearing about her experience. We also welcome Rana Saghie from the Legal Agenda, who is a legal research and advocacy institution based on working on human and legal situation for the consolidation of the legal situation in the Arab world. Rana Saghie, and also Rana Sweis, founder and managing director of Wishbox Media, who provides training in the journalistic field. Okay, the floor is yours. Please go ahead. Okay, regarding contracts, well, many institutions I worked for, well, there were no agreements, no written contracts, just emails or a verbal agreement. And this is why my relationship with them was not clear at all, not on the financial level. I did not even ask or know about my salary. I thought that they would, appreciate my journalistic efforts. And then I found out that the payment was so low, and not even being equal to my efforts. In addition, the intellectual relationship between the institution and myself as journalist is inexistent, especially when I when I work to an institution that is in another country, of course, given the different bylaws and regulations. Of course, such clause, the lack of such clause is very important because, for instance, if we want to apply for an award, we do not know anything who would, merit such awards, etc. As for low wages or salaries, in addition to the delay in payment, let me tell you that some institutions just pay every 3 months and sometimes a whole year to pay. For instance, if I have to wait for a whole year to get $100, what would be the benefit? Believe me that in some cases I paid to work. They don't take into consideration the worldwide increasing, living prices. Believe me, in my case, prices of, basic things of gasoline are as high as Paris. However, salaries are so low. This is why, with such low salaries, we won't benefit from everything. We would even be harmed, and damaged. In addition, in most institutions, unfortunately, salaries, of course, are set as per the efforts of journalists, and this is up to the opinion of the editor. They do not, of course, really think whether $500 would be enough. Of course, it's not worthy that quite very few institutions do pay $500. In addition, of course, to this does apply to investigative reports. Of course, some employers think that it's up to them to decide whether journalists do really or are worthy of such payment. So it's up to the opinion about, for instance, some specific journalistic material. Sometimes extra efforts are made. Sometimes the obstacles do hinder our work as journalists. So this is why they must take into account all this, in addition to all these expenses. Sometimes I have to pay from my own pocket to other journalists to cover other fees or expenses, and the payment, my payment, does not cover everything at the end, unfortunately. So I end up paying from my own pocket. No legal coverage, for instance, is provided for journalists. I know that journalists should assume on the legal level. However, of course, I do my best to be as professional as possible. However, I'm not fully aware about legal requirements and legal clauses, so as not to fall into, the trap of defamation and other legal issues. We could also talk about, well, let me point out another problem I faced. Sometimes I communicated with institutions and I suggested, ideas, and I never got any answer. And then a couple of days later on, I found out that they worked on my ideas, the same ideas, but with other fixed employees. So, of course, they decided, they took my ideas, they stole them, but they preferred to let other journalists working there already work on them. So why, as a journalist, I have to work on, a potential topic, and I submit it as an idea, and then they steal my idea. And of course, this is why sometimes we lose our trust in some media. This is really a major obsession for freelance journalists. Of course, all these, problems are nothing compared to the situation being faced by our colleagues, female colleagues in Gaza, and of course, their situation is exacerbated by their loss of houses, of families, and even their jobs. Many of them have lost their job opportunities, and they are not even at a safe place in their shelters or whether in their coverage. Thank you so much, Ansar. It's true that the situation in Gaza is quite harsh. Of course, violations have different forms. I have already spoken to you, but of course, all these problems you have faced, Ansar, are really huge. So what about the legal aspect, and what could be the practical recommendations in order to solve this issue? Thank you, Dima. Of course, this is quite a complex issue, and it's a problematic issue. In one session, we cannot tackle all aspects. However, few comments from a legal perspective. First of all, what about the importance of protecting freelance journalists? Well, actually, we are witnessing an increase in the numbers of freelance journalists for different reasons, and the importance, main importance, is that freelance journalists are the mostly capable of enjoying freedom of speech, because we see how many journalists working in the traditional media with traditional media institutions are really being restricted or subjected to restrictions because the media institution they work for wouldn't be ready to publish all their works. This is why we need to protect the freedom of speech and expression. In regard to affordability of the freelance job, of course, this does not encompass only salaries. Of course, there are the fees for the equipment, the purchasing or rental of equipment, in addition transportation, and also working teams. If are talking about the coverage of protests or demonstrations, do not forget about the attacks, how some journalists are being beaten and attacked in addition to their equipment. Of course, we are talking about some violations and cases of abuse, which would pave the way for huge defamation. So who would, of course, afford or assume? Of course, I know that journalists who steal other colleagues' ideas should assume. However, in other cases, regardless, of course, forced disappearance and arbitrary detention. I mean, this is another thing. We heard Mr. Tare yesterday. Of course, he was working as a freelancer and cooperating with Al Jazeera. So I don't know whether there has been any communication with his family. What's even worse or more serious, some journalists do not even dare to embark on that journey because they have real fears. And this is one of the main concerns regarding the freedom of expression. Of course, this also has a negative impact on productivity, even to have interviews. You know, some media institutions do not even assume the responsibility. For instance, journalists who, for instance, demand or ask for appointments with ministers, etc., who would cover him or her to get an appointment? Of course, regardless intellectual property. Before embarking on recommendations, what about the definition of freelance journalists? Because there has been a confusion. Sometimes we call ourselves freelancers, and we are even convinced that we are freelancers. However, in reality, we are part-timers, and this is actually a way out for media institutions, or some of them, in order not to generalize, not to assume any responsibility. However, the truth is that many journalists are not freelancers but part-timers, and of course, for this has legal and other consequences and responsibilities to be shouldered by media institutions. And this is why some governments and states have set some legal sanctions to be imposed on such institutions. As for recommendations, they should not only protect freelancers, but they should be meant for guaranteeing all the rights of journalists in general. This is why media institutions and their donors should be convinced that serious work should be done regarding working journalists and freelancers. They should be convinced that to pay salaries should not be only, out of an ethical responsibility or obligation. They should guarantee the freedom, the protection, and the freedom of expression. On the journalistic level, what journalists can do, of course, they have legitimate fears. However, from a legal perspective, I will be talking, and then we'll see about implementation. Of course, contracts should be sine qua non conditions. Some journalists would fear, to lose their relationship with the media institution. This is why they accept not to undersign any contract. Well, this should not be the case. Reluctancy or delay cannot be justified. Contracts could have the form of an email. For instance, just a confirmation by email could be considered as a legal, background or contract. Of course, contracts should not be understood as, a future, perhaps, submission or appearance before trial, in trials before courts. Well, just by the mere act of sending an email and getting a confirmation, we can convince everybody that is a legitimate job, thanks to which we can survive and our families can survive. This, false or fake idea of filing a lawsuit later on is not true. This is why advocacy organizations should really work so all contracts be accessible to all journalists, especially that some of journalists cannot afford, contacting a lawyer. I still have 2 minutes. Okay, so journalists should have a clear idea about the size, the extent, the deadline, everything related to the work and the fees as well, in addition to what's called refusal fees. For instance, in the event there are also cancellation fees. If in the event journalists decide, for instance, to cancel or not to publish an article, if the cancellation happens a week later or a month later, there would be differences. Also, there is something called the kitus, which is now included within the salary in many cases. As for the time framework for the payment, do we have, as journalists, to wait till the very last episode? Of course, we can ask for settlements by term. Of course, publication or editing or media institution should also bear the commission fees. And of course, we should not wait for a couple of months to be paid. As for intellectual property, it's not necessary that the intellectual property be the sole property of the institution. The information also, the safety as well is another issue, and we heard about it yesterday. Thank you so much. Well, actually, we, along with the legal agenda, are thinking how to have common recommendations that are more detailed and could be shared in general with all journalists and not only members of the network. Rana Sweis, since you are another freelance journalist and you are the founder of a startup media, we know about your experience as a journalist and also the importance of investing in the relationship between directors and journalists. Please let us hear from you.
As a founder of company to produce media services. I'm working with the designers and artists and journalists that are freelancers, also cameramen. It's very important for me to build the relationships with these people. I'm not working only one project. I've been working on project that goes for years. It's really important to respect these artists and journalists that are freelancers and pay them on time, respect their time. Sometimes the company that I am giving the project to, they get delayed with payments. Sometimes an international organization was delayed for 8 months. I can't tell the cameraman who worked 8 months ago that you should wait for 8 months. So I take fund from another project so that I can pay on time to that cameraman because this guy is a creative. Of course, it could be male or female. And I want them to stay with me. I want a sustainable relationship. Respect is really important. It's for respect of time and payments. Respect the relationship itself. And because I am building this team, I think they are really enthusiastic to work with me, Dima. Sometimes they leave other work to work with me, to work with Wishbox Media. So I'd like to tell you how exchangeable the relationship is. As a foundation that who respect the freelance journalists and artists, your production will be high quality and you'll have clients or investors in your projects because you are producing good quality products. As a journalist, I wanted to say, at least I'm talking about Jordan, we saw that are very great journalists, especially if I may say about the ARIJ newspaper. They are investigative journalists that I have high respect for them. They left the profession because and wait to private sector foundations and NGOs because journalism, generally the printed press, uh, it's not fair for them for many reasons. The digital development and the print press is not keeping it up with the development in the digital press. So they are slowing down with the quality of the news that they're presenting. Also, there is a collapse, financial collapse in the local organizations and foundations. The payments are really low. We didn't speak about that, but the freelance journalists, they get paid the same fees that they received 20 years ago. It's not changing, but you all know that how expensive life is now and changing, but the fees and payments are the same. This made a lot of journalists in the local media organizations and freelancer journalists in Jordan as well to go another profession, say in communication, in non-governmental foundations. We have my colleague Mohamed Shamahir. He's a journalist and a very good journalist. So a lot of people went other way, and all these journalists, they are passionate about journalism, but they had to leave it and go to other fields because of the problems that we mentioned. Hiber in 2015, they had a publication that 550 journalists in Jordan today. That was in 2015. I think the number now is increasing. These are freelance journalists and are not registered in the syndicate. There are 33% of these presume 33% of the journalism body in Jordan. And that was in 2015. There's no legal protection, as my colleague Rana said. Insurance. Those who are working in media foundation, they have no insurance. The freelancers have no insurance. Also, the freelancers generally in our Arabic countries, there's a lack of freedom of speech and no freedom of journalism. This highly impacted our journalists. They are depressed. I cannot cover as much subjects as I wanted as before. That also made some journalists leave the profession. The last thing I want to say is yesterday with my colleagues, we were talking about solutions. We wouldn't only want to state the problems. Everybody here knows what kind of challenges that we are facing. But let's come up with suggestions and recommendations and solutions. How can we to have, for example, an application, as my colleague suggested, that where all the newspapers, all media foundations, they have in the we have in this app. Once you click on it, you would know this kind of report they will pay for it. The investigative report is paid in this fee, so that when I have an offer in this kind of foundation, I would know how to expect to be paid for an investigative reporting or a regular report. What are the complaints against this media foundation? We'll have a community to protect each other. There should be a legal volunteer in this app that I can reach out to. There are solutions, actually. Maybe we can come up with a solution after this session. Thank you a lot. Thanks, Rana. Absolutely, we were talking about that. I think transparency in media and to pronounce the payments, actually, this is absent in our sector. At least we need to know that some of the platforms are more transparent in the payments. So when they announce for a new job, and when they try to receive applications, they are actually announcing this is the annual fee for that occupation or for that job opportunity. This kind of transparency is really welcome, because when people are interested in applying for a specific job, so that also that the platforms will be had a reputation of being transparent. Before we continue our discussion, I'd like to see if there are any questions from the audience. I'm having some questions, online questions. If there is anyone from the audience, please. Good morning. It's not a question, some of the suggestions only. The problem of our freelancers colleagues are three actual problems. The first is recognition. The national legislations refuse or does not give any credit to the freelancers. The other is the social and financial rights. What I suggest, the third is regulation. What I suggest is we cannot wait anyone gives. In Tunis, in Tunisian law, the freelancer is a journalist. And as much as we could, we tried in our journalist syndicate, in the entity that guarantees the right of journalists, there should be articles about freelancers. Other than that, we would repeat the same questions. That's why we should lobby at a national level to include the special articles about freelancers in the legislations. In Europe previously, they didn't have any freelancers, but when time passed by, journalists went to be freelancers to pay less taxes, for example. As regulation, as organizations that are present here, they can lobby some technical companies that would do economy sensational, is to they would that if a freelancer has a specific publication, have a high rate, this will bring us a lot of money. So strategically, we should work on that. Don't wait for gifts from anybody, and don't expect that media company would give you anything. So that's why you can regulate more, whether on a national level, or maybe we can have a gathering of Arab freelancers. Thanks a lot. We'll meet you again after this session so that we can share this idea, so that we can have a manual for this. Any other questions, please? Good morning. I'm from Yemen. I think when we talk about Yemen, it's really, we have to strike again because it's really complicated, whether for journalists, especially for female journalists. There's a problem that's happening. A lot of organizations that are mediators, local organizations, receive fund from specific donors, and they have a lot of cutoff from the journalists, especially freelancers. This is a huge problem. We have a suggestion that we work with local organization, that you make sure of the journalists who are working in the field so that they can get what they deserve. I'm talking about the organizations that are concerned with protecting the rights of journalists or those who are producing investigative reports. I think this could be essential. Another point, in media organizations, you are working with as an employee, but you have no contract, and you are committed by time when you're offered, as you are an essential employee, but when you are sick and when you travel and when you have no insurance whatsoever. If you are detained, your family are not supported whatsoever. They can release you, like, for example, I think the problem with Yemen, especially with the current situation, is highly complicated. We really hope that there should be any support to that issue. Also, make sure that mediator organization that would protect the journalists, or at least also with the high rate of prices now. They receive donation with dollar, but they give with the current, with the local current. I think I wish I have conveyed my idea. Any more questions, please? Good morning. Mahmoud Ishbul from Jordan. Recently, the debate was about the suggestion about freelance rights and their rights. It's been a long debate, and the outcomes where the solution should be an incubator in each country, or internet or networking with all freelance journalists in the Arab homeland, and could be supported by the International Journalists Network, so that this incubator could be a forum, could be association, any kind of a frame, but to have a legal frame to protect all the rights of the freelancer. I think this is the beginning of the road to solve this kind of question. Now, our basic problem is that we don't have an incubator. Where are we going to? So as freelancers, we should have this kind of incubator that can provide services, legal services. Thank you all. A reminder to all who had interventions and suggestions, we want to build on. Please don't forget, our email is info@mcj.org, so that we can continue our discussion after the session. Please resend for us to continue, to send for us so that we continue the session after this forum, so that in the coming future we can think together how is it possible to imply these solutions and build upon them. Ansar, I'd like to go back to you. Let's talk about until we implement these other solutions. Now, you said that you told us about specific violations, from low payments to other violations. What we'd like to know now, how was the debate between you and your chief of editors when you brought up these issues? And after you joined the Marie Colvin Network, and we talked to you individually and with other members about that, we want to know recently or currently what's stopping you, what's keeping you from objecting, really objecting for these violations, or you negotiate, for example, or what are the cases when you try to speak up or negotiate or insist to get your rights? What was the outcome? This question has two parts. The first one is there was been negotiations. Tried to persist on demanding my rights, but there's no response. What made me continue with this foundation, unfortunately, is because I had to work maybe for the well-known platform, so that my work would reach out to wider scope. When I discussed with the specific foundations, some were like had a simple reaction. Because you are Ansar, I will give you more because you have important material and ideas that we want to work with. But some organizations did not react. Some organizations, I had a hard work in order to negotiate with them. Uh, and I hardly got the courage to say that I wouldn't work in a low payments. We had a lot of negotiations. Some of the demands was granted, but others were not. I got a little raise, but other expenses are still working on it. So depends. If they can cover the other expenses, if they don't think they should, they wouldn't. I'd like to comment about the incubator. It's really important, but we need awareness, overall awareness that they should refuse to work in low payments, so that there will tendencies to all organizations that all freelancers are refused to work in low payments. That's why we have to give them a raise so that we can work, so that they can work and we can work. This is what should happen. Thank you, Ansar. We have less than 5 minutes. Maybe if we want to conclude the idea of implementing that Rana Sweis was talking about, let's say that it can impact legally, but if we decide to have to do something and there should be a movement, let's call an overall Arabic movement, not only in one country. Rana Saghie, how do you think? What do you think the possibility of activating this thing? Is it legal or should be collateral lobbying? They are complementary. It should be legal and lobbying also, because reputation is important to all organizations. You should know who. It will make us know what are the foundations that are interacting seriously with the payments. Implementation and the apps are really applicable. So regulation and having incubator, it should be the contact should be on a personal level, but the important is the networking between the journalists. I think this incubator on a long term can solve the problem. It doesn't have to be a specific form or within the framework of syndicate, the traditional syndicate, but any any gathering. There are clubs for judges. They could be clubs for journalists. Of course, the freelancers they start doing that in Philippines and other countries. We can benefit from the experts. So incubator is essential also to demand of reforming some of the laws, the labor work and social security. The other kind is it's really important to have sectoral networking. Even the lawyers sometimes they are being harassed when the when the media are standing up for the lawyers, they can help us. Also, for the journalists, it's really important to coordinate with the lawyers. One last word for Rana Sweis. Until we implement all these ideas that need overall efforts. The journalists who are listening now, it's great, but for now, if I'm asking for a raise and I'm saying the chief editors, $100 is very few, I need more, the reply would be, if you don't like it, you can others who can accept. So accordingly, what should we say to the journalists who are unfortunately they had to continue this problem? Dima, all journalists should take the decision. I can't speak up for all the journalists. Each journalist is a freelancer journalist, has specific circumstances that he's really in need either to the job or to the payment, even it's a very small payment. I can't impose on that on him and ask him to refuse 100. This is something I can't say today, but it's a vicious cycle. If I continue accepting $70 per article, and I refuse then some others who would do that for free, this is a vicious circle. It won't change anything. I think we respect our time. Don't pay from your pocket. This is an occupation. You give efforts and you are writing. Why they pay for the hardsmith, for example, and your payment is less than it should be. It depends on the person himself. They should respect you, and you also should respect your craft and your profession. I wish everybody, and I know how hard the situation is for us as journalists, and of course the freelancers, journalists as well. I wish that we think of others as well. If I ask for $200 and they refused, the other person should accept 50. So the one who accepted the 50 is not respecting others, and you're respecting your occupation. I cannot generalize because we are going through a harsh financial era, and everybody, it's up to him. There should be a radical solution. Hopefully, we can come up with solutions. So this is how we can deal with it. Thank you, Ansar Toimzy, Rana Saghie, Rana Sweis. Thank you, our audience. I want to remind you again, please write for us via email if you want us to continue this discussion. And thank you.